Hey, I'm Paul, and welcome to Build and Bond. Today we're going to build Jabba's Sail Barge, the Ultimate Collector's Edition version. And what we're going to bond about is talking about how this and the story exemplifies some great life lessons. You don't want to miss it. Stick around. So there's about five main themes that we're going to talk about together. And if you haven't been here before, here's how this works. We're building, we're going to see this set come together in kind of a time lapse, and then we're going to bond just as if we were all in the same place building it together. We would just have a conversation, right? So I'm going to be sharing some of this stuff that I've thought of when I was building this, and it's all advice and things that are good reminders that I love hearing that in my own life and stuff that maybe I wish someone had told me at some point. So I love to share that when we're talking and building. So if you're ready, let's get started. So this set made me think about the power of true friendship. That's not really hard to understand why, right? So, you've got the fact that there's three things kind of going on here for me. One is you've got your lifelong friends are the ones who will show up without being asked. Sort of the definition of a real friend, right? They know that you're needed, and you show up. That's what you do when you're that kind of a friend. Just like Lando and Chewbacca and Leia, they risk everything to save Han. And, when you have real friends, they're the ones who show up during the toughest moments, right? Um, you also kind of have to trust your team. That's another lesson from this, I think, is that, Luke's plan, kind of elaborate plan, but it only works when everyone commits and really does their part. So if one of the team members decided they weren't going to do it or were going to back out midway through, that would have thrown everything into chaos. But they didn't, and as a result, it worked. So if friends work together when they stick together, right? Um, Sometimes friendship, unfortunately, requires sacrifice. So it's not always easy. Friendship can be difficult, and that, not that it's not worth it, but I mean, there's always some sacrifice in friendship sometimes, where it's a give and take. You try things out, just to make the friendship work. It's the friendship is more important than the temporary sacrifice. If that makes sense. So Leia is an example of this, right? So she endures being, Jabba's slave for a while because she knows ultimately that's going to pay off. That's going to be what helps rescue Han. So short-term sacrifice for long-term friendship goals, right? Okay. There also was hard to think about the idea, the theme of sort of overcoming obstacles and maybe your fears a little bit. There were a couple of examples in this for me. Um, One is when, it's not part of this set, but when Luke gets trapped in the Rancor pit and has to strategically think, how is he going to get out of that? He really turned the tables, right? It didn't panic, turned the tables, and then kind of figured out a way that he was going to get out of it, use that to his advantage. And sometimes you have to do that in life, right? You get unexpected things happen, just being calm and thinking through them is often all you need to do. Um, I also think that this set really reminded me of the importance of preparation. So things that other people don't see necessarily, but that you're doing that really help you in the long run. So, for example, Luke building his lightsaber and putting this plan together before we even see the story start, I think is a good example of that. So it's okay to have preparation. Sometimes preparation is the most important thing, actually, right? And then lastly, fear and confidence. Those two things that seem to be opposed are really part of this story. So there's a lot to be worried about, a lot to be afraid of as these characters. But, Luke trusted, he was confident in his plan. He was able to make this all work. And as a result, everything worked out fine. But if he'd given into the fear part of it, and we know fear leads to et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, it would have had a very different outcome. So it's important for us to remember that we've gone through things before in our lives, and that just because the situation is different or new doesn't mean that we can't overcome it. We've done that before in the past successfully, and just believing in yourself is really important, having that confidence. Another theme that comes out of this build for me is the power of reinvention and growth. For example, I like to remember that I am not who I was before. I'm not. I've changed. I've grown as a person. I'm different than I was before. You are different than you were before. And Luke comes back to Tatooine a completely different person than he was when he left. He's grown in lots of ways, and he is not the same person anymore. And that is what makes it work for him. That's what leads to the success in this part of the story, is that growth he's able to apply to this situation. And because he had that growth, because he left, because he changed who he was and grew, he was able to be successful. It's important to keep that in mind. And it's important to keep that in mind because it's good to step into your potential. It's good to be open to being better than you were and better than you are now, and growing in different ways that sometimes you don't even expect was going to happen. Another thing that comes up with this idea of reinvention and growth is the idea that you are allowed to leave toxic situations. It's important to break free from them. And so an example of that, a very literal one, is Leia breaking free of Jabba's clutches, right? And so that's just a slight symbolism there of being able to get away from things that you don't need to be part of anymore. Sometimes it's important to leave those situations behind. And lastly, in this theme, there's the idea of the fact that you are stronger than you think you are. You never know what you're capable of until you're put into situations where you really have to step up. And just like Leia and Han and Luke did in this situation, they were able to do things they didn't think they could do, and you can too in your life. I think that's really important to remember that just because you haven't done it before, it doesn't mean you can't do it. It's important to try, and you never know what you can actually do. Another theme that comes out of this is the importance of being able to be open to adventure and taking risks. Sometimes you don't expect these things to happen, but how you respond to them is important. So, for example, Han didn't know what was going on at the beginning of this sequence, but he leaned into it, and the fact that he was going to go for the adventure, meant that there was good outcomes from that. And he's sort of a reminder to me that life is meant to be experienced. And so when you open yourself up to that and just go with it like he does all the time, amazing things can happen. So you never know. So make sure you put yourself out there sometimes. Be open to it. I think of Luke So you can take a leap, right? Sometimes a leap of faith is important. Just like when Luke does his jump off that gangplank, right? He doesn't know what's going to happen for sure, but he takes the risk because he believes in himself. I think it's important to remember that you can believe in yourself, even when other people don't. When things look scary, even if you believe what you can do, it can be really amazing, right? Also, sometimes the hardest things have the best outcomes. So this was definitely challenging for our heroes in the story, but at the end of the day, this getting them all back together and being able to have this small defeat over Jabba allowed them to set a chain of events in place that ultimately resulted in taking down the Empire. So little things that, even though they're difficult, can sometimes have really big impact in the future. And that's important to know, that while you're in the middle of it, it can seem really difficult, but there's always maybe something good going to come out of things. And that's really important. So being open to the adventure sometimes is the best way to go. The other life lesson that's good to remember is that it's okay to remove things that no longer serve you. It's okay. You can leave things behind and move on. That's fine. In fact, sometimes that's the healthiest thing to do. We have a really literal example here, right, of being able to get rid of Jabba is something that's holding you back, literally holding Leia back. So letting go of that relationship is really important for her to be able to move forward. You also have this other idea that sometimes not everything has to come with you from your past. So the sail barge exploding kind of is an example of that, right? It's left in pieces, and so that the team then can move on. And maybe there's things in your life that you've had to do that with, and it's okay. It's okay to leave things behind so that you can move forward and be the best version of yourself that you can be. All right, and there we have it all together. It's kind of an impressive model. There's so many parts to this. It really is incredible. It kind of is a journey to put it together, I think that's why it made me think of things that are important to your life journey, right? So I hope you had as much fun building it as I did. As always, my favorite part of doing this is doing it with you. So remember, whether you have this Lego set, whether you have any Lego sets, when it all comes down to it, you got this. See you next time.